What is up, guys? This is Pinzo, back with another video today. As you can see, guys, we've got something similar to last time loaded up. We've got another guide for you guys. So last time I made a very broad guide on how to prepare for Paragon 2 using Smite, and I'll be branching off of that today, but going into more specifics about a single role. Now, most people that have played a MOBA do have a role that they prefer to play, whether it's their most fun role, their best role, something that they just enjoy a lot. Mine is going to be the middle lane. That is my preferred role. It's probably my best role, and that's the guide we're going to be doing today. So without any further ado, guys, let's jump straight into this guide. There are going to be just a couple sections on today's guide, as it is only a preparation guide, and I cannot go too much in depth about Paragon 2. This is mostly going to be how to learn how you play so that you can be prepared for Paragon 2 and you don't have to figure out a play style. Which brings us to our first point today, and that's going to be what kind of caster you like to play. Now in Smite, these are called mages. I believe in Paragon they were called casters. I'm not sure what they would be called per each Paragon 2 game, but I will be calling them casters for the most. Now your main two types of casters that you can group most characters into are going to be spam and impact. Now your spam characters is pretty straightforward. These are characters with very, very low cooldowns, and your goal is to use them as much as possible. Now, these are often better for newer players or more inexperienced players, as if you hit 50% of these abilities, you're still doing some damage in these fights, whereas with an impact caster, you would not be doing near as much. I recommend spam characters for anyone who is learning the game, as they are very forgiving in the amount of damage you can do. If you have an ability on a 3-second cooldown, you can use it 3 times in the amount of time that an impact caster would use it once. Even if you only hit it once, that's better than missing an impact ability and not having it for the rest of the fight. Now, moving on to an impact caster, this is someone who has longer cooldowns. These are generally 8 to 10 seconds when it comes to late game. Some abilities will be on longer cooldowns, depending on exactly how your character plays. But these abilities do damage. Most of the time, an impact caster will have abilities slightly longer cooldowns, but they will be hitting very, very hard. Now, what this does is it forces you to land your abilities, and this can be very difficult for some players, especially if you're getting used to new keybinds, new sensitivity, anything like that. This can be difficult. Now, I personally recommend impact casters for anyone who's very confident that they can hit their abilities, and or people who are very good at positioning and can get 2 or 3 rounds of abilities off in a fight, even on an impact caster. In reality, this comes down to what you feel comfortable playing, what more fits your playstyle, and honestly, which one is more fun. Now, I personally am an impact caster, but the reason for this is because I like to hit my abilities. Now, I don't usually use all of my impact abilities on cooldown. They are usually off of cooldown for a couple seconds because I want to use them at the best possible time. Spam casters are not like this. Spam casters are using their abilities almost essentially on cooldown. As soon as that cooldown is over, you're using it again. You're not mattering a whole lot whether you are hitting them, whether how much damage you're doing, who you're hitting with them. You just want to be using them. This doesn't fit my playstyle personally, but it could fit yours. I would recommend trying a few out and going from there. So once you have figured out what kind of caster you'd like to play, the next thing you need to do is get into a game. And the first part of your game in the middle lane is going to be the laning phase. Now, after you have your character figured out and you know who you're going to play, you need to know how to play them. Now, generally there are 2 types of casters in the early game in this laning phase, and those are going to be fighting casters and clearing casters. Now, a fighting caster is usually going to be your spam casters, and their goal is to do damage. You want to poke out the enemy middle laner. You want to make their health low enough so that they are scared to push out to lane to clear their minions. Now, this works even better in a game like Paragon 2, where last hitting is so important. If they are too low to come up to the wave in last hit, then they're going to have to back and they're going to get behind. I believe these kind of casters will be very prominent in Paragon 2, but that's just my uninformed opinion, so don't take that too heartily. And with that, you have your clearing casters. These are casters who basically want to walk up to the minion wave, clear it, and then run away. These are usually going to be late game gods whose early game fight is not very good, So their goal is to farm as fast as possible, clear as many minions as possible, so that they can get to late game where they have their impact damage, where they have their big fights, where they can win the game. These are two general terms. There are some characters where maybe you can't fight until you have an ultimate. Maybe you can't fight until you have all three of your abilities. Some characters walk into lane with one ability and they can fight and they can 100 to 0 you. It just depends on what kind of character you're playing, and once you figure that out, you can refine your playstyle with each caster individually. It will take some practice, but once you get good at one caster, it will be much easier to get good at the next one. So what happens after the laning phase? Well, depending on the game, this can be a very quick transition, a very slow transition. It will depend what parts of your team are ahead or behind, or whether you need more farm. And the next big phase of a game is going to be late game. Now, late, it can be a weird word for it, as it can come as early as 12 or 15 minutes into a game, depending on how fast the game is moving. Late game is referred to as when team fighting starts. So when you start getting 4v4 groups, 5v5 groups into a team fight, this is going to be your late game. And what is your mid laner's role in the late game? Number one, you need to get your abilities off. So you need to be able to not only use your abilities, but land them consistently and under pressure. The number one thing you need to know about these late game fights is that you are going to be the target. The mid laner and the AD carry are going to be the number one targets for the enemy to try and kill. This is because you are going to be doing lots of damage, especially AoE, and that is really bad for an enemy team. So they're going to come at you, which means you are going to be under pressure for the entirety of a game. This means you need to be staying in the back, and this means you need to be playing safe. Whether you have an escape, some sort of dash, leap, something like that, you need to hold on to it. You are very, very, very rarely using your dash, leap, escape aggressively. This is going to be saved almost exclusively for bailing your own ass out and not for helping your team. The other thing you need to look at is your cooldown management. Now, this is more important for an impact caster because they have the longer cooldowns, but even on spam characters, you need to have cooldowns available for when you are getting dove. When the enemy gets to you, you need to have some way to distance yourself, whether it's a dash, a stun, something that gives you more distance to where you are not getting insta-killed in fights. With impact casters, this is much harder because your abilities are on 8-second cooldown. That's an 8-second window for an enemy. This means that whether you're playing a caster with an escape or without one, positioning is your number one goal in these late game team fights. Now, one sort of obscure tip that I'm going to throw in here is you will probably die in a lot of these fights. Now, that's not going to be always your fault. Sometimes your positioning will be off. You, as a mid laner, are counting on your team, specifically your solo laner and your tank, your supports. These are the people who need to protect you. Now, they won't always be able to do their job. Sometimes an enemy dive, if it's very well coordinated, just will not fail. In these situations, you need to get your damage off. If you are dying, you need to throw all of your abilities down. Very, very, very rarely will you die with your ultimate. If you died with your ultimate, you better have gotten one shot, or else your team will be mad. You cannot die with an ultimate. Casters generally have ultimates that hit for thousands of damage, and you need that damage in a fight. You need to use your abilities before you die. If you're going to die, give your team the best chance they can to win that team fight. That's the number one tip I have for you in these late game fights. Give your team the chance. Okay guys, a quick summary of what you should have learned in this video. Now, you hopefully learned what type of caster you would prefer to play once you get into a game and jump in and try it. Whether you want to play spam or impact, that's going to be up to your personal preference. You're going to hopefully have gotten some tips on how to play a spam character or an impact character in the laning phase, and hopefully you got the gist of team fighting. Generally, stay in the back, use your abilities, try not to die. If you're gonna die, give your team a chance. Now, these are most of the tips that I have for you guys today. Now, as always, subscribe below if you want to see the next guide. The next guide will be a general jungle guide for how to prepare for Paragon 2. And with that, guys, that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, guys, I have been Pinzo. This video is Dunzo. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.